I touched on what metering is in last week's wrap-up. I promised a longer, more detailed video on the subject, so here we are. Let's start with a broad description of what metering is. Metering is how the camera figures out the proper exposure. I should probably step back and touch on what exposure is, huh? Okay. Basically, exposure is the amount of light that gets to the sensor in your DSLR. That's it. To figure out how much light is needed, though, the camera automatically meters, at least in almost all DSLRs. It measures the amount of light in your scene, and it does calculations to figure out the best exposure. There are different ways that the camera meters, though. You set which way. Most DSLRs have 3 types. They might be called different things depending on the brand of your camera, though. The first is matrix, or maybe evaluative metering. In this mode, the camera will include a large area of the frame and break it up into a matrix of smaller areas, which the camera then evaluates according to some special algorithm calculations, taking into account the distribution of the light and the color, the distance, and even the composition, and it will set the exposure according to them. You could use this metering mode in most situations because it's looking at everything. Here's an example of matrix metering. This is a fairly extreme example. I don't have much light on me, but I'm backlit, and I'm also wearing a dark outfit. The camera has looked at a lot of the frame and made some decisions on how much light to let in. It has assumed that I want the light from the background to be brought down a bit so the whole background won't be so blown out. Consequently, though, I, in the foreground, look darker. I think it makes for a cool photo anyway, but I'll show you how changing the metering mode will change how I look in these photos. The second type is center-weighted metering. The camera will meter the whole frame and use an average to determine the exposure. However, it gives more priority to the center of the frame. This type of metering is great for portraits because you are most concerned with making the subject look good in that situation, and the subject is usually in the center of the frame. Here's an example where I've used center-weighted metering, and it has split the difference, so to speak, of the super bright background and the not so bright me in the foreground. It decided on its weighted average and allowed more light in, so you can see the background is more blown out, but I am more lit up as well. The third type is spot or partial metering. In this type, only a small area of the frame is metered. Depending on your camera, it may choose the center of the frame or maybe the autofocus area that you've chosen. Check your camera manual to see how this type works for you. It'll be able to tell you. This type of metering is handy when you have a lot of contrast in your lighting situation, like where the subject is backlit with a bright light, or in the opposite situation, like if you're taking a photo of the moon or a sunset. I've got 2 examples for you here. The one on the right is using spot metering on my shirt, and the one on the left is using spot metering on my face. You can see on the left where I spot metered on my black shirt, the camera decided to let a lot of light in. The background is quite blown out, and I am quite lit up as well. On the right, where I spot metered on my face, which is lighter than my shirt, it lets a little less light in, so I look a little bit darker. You can especially see the difference between the two by looking at my black shirt. On the left, where I spot metered on the shirt, the camera tried to bring it to a medium gray, and on the right, where I spot metered on my face, the shirt looks more black because less light was let in. Now, how you change your metering mode depends on your camera. You may have to go into the menus to set the mode, or you may have a dial on the body. Check your manual again, that'll be able to tell you how to do it. The best way to get familiar with how your camera meters is, of course, to experiment. You can stay on matrix or evaluative metering and usually get great photos. However, using center-weighted or spot or partial metering is a powerful tool. So let me know if you have any questions.